once the largest library in the world and containing works by the greatest thinkers and writers of antiquity, including Homer, Plato, Socrates, and many more. The Library of Alexandria is popularly believed to have been destroyed in a huge fire 2,000 years ago and its collection lost. Since its destruction, this wonder of the ancient world has haunted the imagination of poets, historians, travelers, and scholars, who have lamented the tragic loss of knowledge and literature. Today, the idea of a universal library situated in a city celebrated as the center of learning in the ancient world has attained mythical status. The mystery has been perpetuated by the fact that no architectural remains or archaeological finds that can definitely be attributed to the library have ever been recovered, which is surprising for such a supposedly renowned and imposing structure. This lack of physical proof has even persuaded some to wonder if the fabulous library actually existed at all in the form popularly imagined. Home to the massive Pharos Lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Mediterranean seaport of Alexandria was founded by Alexander the Great in 330 BC, and as with many other cities, took its name from him. After his death in 323 BC, Alexander's empire was left in the hands of his generals, with Ptolemy Isoter taking Egypt and making Alexandria his capital in 320 BC. Formerly a small fishing village on the Nile Delta, Alexandria became the seat of the Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt and developed into a great intellectual and cultural center. It was perhaps the greatest city in the ancient world. The story of the founding of the Library of Alexandria is obscure. It is believed that around 295 BC the scholar and orator Demetrius of Phalerum, an exiled governor of Athens, convinced Ptolemy Isoter to establish a library. Demetrius envisioned a library that would house a copy of every book in the world, an institution to rival Athens itself. Subsequently, under the patronage of Ptolemy I, Demetrius organized the construction of the Temple of the Muses or the Museum, from which our word museum is derived. This structure was a shrine complex modeled on the Lyceum of Aristotle in Athens, a center for intellectual and philosophical lectures and discussion. The Temple of the Muses was to be the first part of the library complex at Alexandria, and was located within the grounds of the royal palace, in an area known as the Brutian or Palace Quarter, in the northeastern, Greek district of the city. The museum was a cult center with shrines for each of the 9 muses, but also functioned as a place of study with lecture areas, laboratories, observatories, botanical gardens, a zoo, living quarters, and dining halls, as well as the library itself. A priest chosen by Ptolemy I was the administrator of the museum, and there was also a separate librarian in charge of the manuscript collection. At some point during his reign, from 282 to 246 BC, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, the son of Ptolemy Isoter, established the royal library to complement the Temple of the Muses set up by his father. It is not clear whether the royal library, which was to become the main manuscript library, was a separate building located next to the museum, or if it was an extension of the original building. However, the consensus of opinion is that the royal library did form part of the Temple of the Muses. During the reign of Ptolemy II, the idea of the universal library seems to have taken shape. Apparently, more than 100 scholars were housed within the museum, whose job it was to carry out scientific research, lecture, publish, translate, copy, and collect not only original manuscripts of Greek authors, allegedly including the private collection of Aristotle, but translations of works from Egypt, Assyria, Persia, as well as Buddhist texts and Hebrew scriptures. One story goes that the hunger of Ptolemy III for knowledge was so great that he decreed that all ships docking at the port should surrender their manuscripts to the authorities. Copies were then made by official scribes and delivered to the original owners, the originals being filed away in the library. An often quoted figure for the library holdings at its peak is 500,000 documents, though whether this refers to the amount of books or the number of papyrus scrolls is unclear. However, in view of the fact that many papyrus rolls were needed to make up an entire book, it is more likely that it refers to the number of scrolls. Even 500,000 scrolls has been thought too high by some scholars, as the construction of a building with such a vast amount of storage space would be an immense though not impossible undertaking. Nevertheless, during the reign of Ptolemy II, the collection at the Royal Library became so vast that a daughter library was established. This library was situated in the precincts of the Temple of Serapis, in the Egyptian district of Rhachides, in the southeastern part of the city. During the librarianship of the Greek writer Callimachus, the daughter library contained 4,800 scrolls, all of which were copies of those in the main library. The alleged total destruction by fire of the Library of Alexandria, with the consequent loss of the most complete collection of ancient literature ever assembled, has been a point of heated debate for centuries. What exactly happened to this amazing storehouse of ancient knowledge, and who was responsible for its burning? The first point that needs to be mentioned is that the greatest catastrophe of the ancient world may never have taken place on the scale often supposed. Nevertheless, the library did disappear practically without a trace, so obviously a disaster of some kind befell it. The most popular suspect in the case is Julius Caesar. It is alleged that during Caesar's occupation of the city of Alexandria in 48 BC, he found himself in the royal palace, hemmed in by the Egyptian fleet in the harbor. For his own safety he had his men set fire to the Egyptian ships, but the fire got out of control and spread to the parts of the city nearest the shore, which included warehouses, depots, and some arsenals. After Caesar's death, it was generally believed that it was he who had destroyed the library. Roman philosopher and dramatist Seneca, quoting from Livy's History of Rome, written between 63 BC and 14 AD, says that 40,000 scrolls were destroyed in the fire started by Caesar. Greek historian Plutarch mentions that the fire destroyed the great library. In his book, The Vanished Library, Luciano Canfora interprets the evidence from ancient writers not to indicate that the great library itself was destroyed, but manuscripts stored in warehouses near the port waiting for export. In 391 AD, Emperor Theodosius I, as part of his attempt to wipe out paganism, officially sanctioned the destruction of the Serapeum, or Temple of Serapis at Alexandria. The destruction of the temple was carried out under Theophilus, Bishop of Alexandria, and afterward a Christian church was built on the site. It has been hypothesized that the daughter library of the museum, located close to the temple, and the royal library itself, were also razed to the ground at this time. However, while it is plausible that manuscripts from the Serapeum library may have been destroyed during this purge, there is no evidence that the royal library still existed at the end of 4th century. The last suggested perpetrator of the crime is the Caliph Omar. In 640 AD, the Arabs captured Alexandria after a long siege. According to the story, the conquering Arabs heard about a magnificent library containing all the knowledge of the world and were anxious to see it. But the Caliph, unmoved by this vast collection of learning, apparently stated they will either contradict the Quran, in which case they are heresy, or they will agree with it, so they are superfluous. The manuscripts were then gathered together and used as fuel for bathhouses in the city. These incredible facts were written down 300 years after the supposed event by many historians and chroniclers. However, while the Arabs may have destroyed a Christian library at Alexandria, it is almost certain that by the mid-7th century the royal library no longer existed. This is made clear by the fact that no mention is made of such a catastrophic event by contemporary writers such as Christian chronicler John of Nikshuk, a Byzantine monk, and Sophronius, the Patriarch of Jerusalem. In fact, attempting to identify one devastating fire that destroyed the great library and all of its holdings is a futile task. Alexandria was often a volatile city, especially during the Roman period, as witnessed by Caesar's burning of the ships, and also in the violent struggle between the occupying forces of Queen Zenobia of Palmyra and the Roman Emperor Aurelian in 271 AD. Aurelian eventually recovered the city for Rome from Queen Zenobia's armies, but not before many parts of Alexandria had been devastated, and the Brutian district, which contained the palace and the library, were apparently made into a desert. The city was again sacked a few years later by Roman Emperor Diocletian. Such repeated damage, spread over several centuries, along with neglect of the library's contents as opinions and affiliations changed, means that the catastrophe was gradual, taking place over a period of 400 or 500 years. Many archaeologists believe that the buildings that once composed the legendary seat of learning at Alexandria, if not buried under the modern metropolis, could still survive relatively intact somewhere in the northeastern part of the city. Construction work began on the Library of Alexandria, a major library and cultural center located close to the site of original library. The huge complex was officially opened on October 16, 2002, and was established to commemorate the vanished Library of Alexandria, and reignite some of the intellectual brilliance that the original center represented. Hopefully, the existence of a new universal library will show that at least the spirit of the ancient library has not been lost. Thank you for watching.